Welcome to Fortune Forecasts. I am your hostess, Daisy Raisler. You're joining me as we progress through the Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward. In the previous chapter, the author took us through the relation between causes and conditions, and he weaved the way through mentioning how when we form ideas in the absolute and we hold it with intensity, they shape the first cause. And simply all we need to do is wait in cheerful expectations for the object to appear. Well, that seems like an easy formula, but I wonder if he's going to reveal more on this process for the application. So, let's get started. This book is found in the public domain in the United States. Chapter 10, Intuition. We have seen that the subjective mind is amenable to suggestion by the objective mind. But there is also an action of the subjective mind upon the objective. The individual's subjective mind is his own innermost self, and its first care is the maintenance of the individuality of which it is the foundation. And since it is pure spirit, it has its continual existence in that plane of being where all things subsist in the universal here and the everlasting now, and consequently can inform the lower mind of things removed from its ken either by distance or futurity. As the absence of the conditions of time and space must logically concentrate all things into a present focus, we can assign no limit to the subjective mind's power of perception. And therefore, the question arises, why does it not keep the objective mind continually informed on all points? And the answer is that it would do so if the objective mind were sufficiently trained to recognize the indications given, and to effect this training is one of the purposes of mental science. When once we recognize the position of the subjective mind as the supporter of the whole individuality, we cannot doubt that much of what we take to be the spontaneous movement of the objective mind has its origin in the subjective mind, prompting the objective mind in the right direction without our being consciously aware of it. But at times when the urgency of the case seems to demand it, or when, for some reason yet unknown, the objective mind is for a while more closely en rapport with the subjective mind, the interior voice is heard strongly and persistently. And when this is the case, we do well to pay heed to it. Want of space forbids me to give examples, but doubtless such will not be wanting in the reader's experience. The importance of understanding and following the intuition cannot be exaggerated, but I candidly admit the great practical difficulty of keeping the happy mean between the disregard of the interior voice and allowing ourselves to be run away with groundless fancies. The best guide is the knowledge that, comes of personal experience, which gradually leads to the acquisition of a sort of inward sense of touch that enables us to distinguish the true from the false, and which appears to grow with the sincere desire for truth and with the recognition of the Spirit as its source. The only general principles the writer can deduce from his own experience are that when, in spite of all appearances pointing in the direction of a certain line of conduct, there is still a persistent feeling that it should not be followed. In the majority of instances, it will be found that the argument of the objective mind, however correct on the facts objectively known, was deficient from ignorance of facts which could not be objectively known at the time, but which were known to the intuitive faculty. Another principle is that our very first impression of feeling on any subject is generally correct. Before the objective mind has begun to argue on the subject, it is like the surface of a smooth lake, which clearly reflects the light from above. But as soon as it begins to argue from outside appearances, these also throw their reflections upon its surface, so that the original image becomes blurred and is no longer recognizable. The first conception is very speedily lost, and it should be therefore carefully observed and registered in the memory with a view to testing the various arguments which will subsequently arise on the objective plane. It is, however, possible to reduce so interior an action as that of the intuition to the form of hard and fast rules, and beyond carefully noting particular cases as they occur. Probably the best plan for the student will be to include the whole subject of intuition in the general principle of the law of attraction, especially if he sees how this law interacts with that personal quality of universal spirit of which we have already spoken. And that's the conclusion and end of chapter 10. Well, what do we have here? Pretty intense. And from personal experience, I can tell you that following that intuition takes practice. And if by way of journaling these moments for yourselves, when you follow your intuition, you can actually go back to these instances and it will serve as a guidepost as how that feeling is for you when you're communicating with that subjective part of you. And, logging it down and what the results were and what was that outcome begins to build up in you your own book on how you respond and how you're communicating. So I've realized that the more that I build up my awareness of my intuition and the moments that I'm making those connections with how those signals or the feelings are, I begin to see that there's more of those than not. And it's pretty amazing, but it does take discipline. It's not just this haphazard thing that happens and, oops, but the more that you build up, it's like a muscle. You begin to strengthen that form and this new language begins to develop for you. I'm just sharing that with you. But if you're ready for more, let's go ahead and go in right through to chapter 11.